Thank you. Now please welcome Hamilton McCullough, our VP of Programs, to introduce our main program speaker.
Thank you, Sue. It is my great honor to be serving as our club's Vice President of Programs this year. Thanks in large part to the work by our tremendous committee. I hope you agree that we have enjoyed compelling and worthwhile programs week after week. This week is personal for me. We have all been touched by cancer, whether it's yourself, a family member, a close friend. Today's speaker is Dave deBronkart. He is better known as E-Patient Dave. 7 years ago, he was diagnosed with cancer. His outcome was measured in weeks, and obviously he survived. He beat the odds. He'll go into more detail about his medical history, but he survived in part by becoming an e-patient. He became a partner in his treatment by being an empowered, equipped, enabled, and engaged patient. But what's even more amazing is what he's done since. He now travels the globe and is a global leader in the e-patient movement. And in just the last few months, he has keynoted speeches in Sweden, Australia, Switzerland. He's logged more than 500,000 miles traveling around the globe to take this message out. He has testified before Congress, and he's on the road every week. And who else here has 25,000 Twitter followers? I mean, that's pretty amazing. People want to hear what he has to say, and today it's our good fortune to hear from him himself. As I said, this particular meeting is personal for me, so please give a warm Seattle welcome to my cousin, E-Patient Dave.
The world can be unpredictable. I had no idea that 7, 8 years ago that I, just a very ordinary high-tech marketing guy, was about to discover that I was dying, was in fact almost dead, and that a couple of years later I'd be on the front page of the Boston Globe because of a blog post I wrote about garbage in my electronic medical record, which led to me testifying in Congress and being in the U.S. News Best Hospitals issue. And people who want a rational, linear, predictable life have to find a different planet to live on, because the reality is that it all runs on chaos, and it's all a matter of what we make of it. And I am here today to recruit you to become more involved in your family's health. I was saved by the best of medicine, and yet medicine today, the entire industry, needs our help. Some people in the industry know that, and some don't. Some are resisting it. So in my 30 minutes here, I want to inform you as much as I can. It's funny, at dinner last night I found out from Hamilton, no, Dave, you don't have your usual hour-long keynote speech here. So there's been a bit of creating and adjusting. Fortunately, whatever the chaos is in PowerPoint, it ain't cancer. Hamilton explained that the word e-patient is empowered, engaged, equipped, enabled. When I started in social media, when I started a blog, I called myself first Patient Dave, and then I discovered the word e-patient and renamed myself. It was just going to be my nickname, like Pirate Bob on the internet. I had no idea it was going to become a thing. So now, having worked in marketing, I know a consistent brand is important. So on Twitter, I'm ePatient Dave, Facebook, ePatient Dave. My website is ePatientDave.com. I'm going to blitz you with a lot of information here. I've already started a blog post on ePatientDave.com that will have today's slides, so you don't have to take notes, and it will have links. Nothing like quick committed action, right? If you want to, I worked in the typesetting machine industry. If you want to talk about an industry that got disrupted, all right, I have some close first-hand experience at what disruption feels like. And what happens is, and this is relevant here, okay, the core assets that used to be bundled in an industry start to come apart so that the people with the need get their hands on them. And that's what's starting to happen in medicine. In our case, the number one asset for typesetting machines was fonts. Now we all have them in our computers. Most of them have them in our phone. Then there was page layout. Did you know we used to make separate special hardwired computers that would read a newspaper wire service story and figure out where you could put hyphens in the words? for typesetting. I think that happens in Microsoft Word and simple text and everything else of the sort these days. Anyway, I'm a data geek. I confess it. I do unnatural acts with Excel. I love automation. One of my obscure claims to fame is that I wrote the world's fastest software for typesetting business cards. You want to talk about a niche market? Boy. But in the era of mergers and acquisitions, this was a great business, because if one bank buys another one and 40,000 new people need new business cards and stationery, that was something. But one thing we learned there that's relevant to healthcare today is data quality is essential, because if you have garbage in the data, you get high-speed garbage coming out of the printing presses. And that's happening now with electronic medical records. The bad news is most of medicine, most of health IT doesn't understand the workflow and data quality issues that other industries have learned. I'm calling on you to check your family's records, because it turns out most of them have mistakes in them. That's one way you can get involved. 2007, I discovered I was almost dead and got better in less than a year. I'm not exaggerating. In 2008, I started blogging about this e-patient stuff, and in 2009, the Society for Participatory Medicine was formed. I'll say a little bit more about that. All I can say is I'm a consumer marketing guy. I like simple terms. My book on this subject is called Let Patients Help. All right? The doctors that are my colleagues got together and they formed a Society for Participatory, 14 syllables. All right? That's the difference between the consumer's perspective and the academic. And I started getting invited to give speeches. Who knew? And in 2010, I felt a calling, and I started doing this full time. In 2011, it went international, and you heard from my cousin where that has all led. One of the senior doctors at my hospital, and I'm telling you this because I want you to realize, you personally, the one in your underwear, all right, to realize that you can do something useful to contribute to the quality and success of your own and your family's health care. Warner Slack here has been saying since the 1970s that patients are the most neglected resource in health care worldwide. It raises the question, since you and I don't have medical training, what's he talking about? Is this really true? And it turns out that a big answer is that when we are involved and thinking and partnering with the physicians and nurses, all right, now they've got to welcome it, that's part of the culture change, but when that happens, outcomes are better. So do not go into a hospital alone, bring a family member along. Laura was talking about how she has had multiple experiences of that with her own family. Her mother taught her that. And just be involved. Well, anyway, Tom Ferguson here, this good-looking doctor here, was the medical editor. Some of you, I'm sure, remember the Whole Earth Catalog, this post-Woodstock hippie self-sufficiency journal, how to build your own house, grow your own food, be responsible for yourself. He was the medical editor of it. In its online edition starting in the 1980s, he knew that the vast majority of what we do is take care of ourselves and our families at home, but he also knew that when trouble hits, something like you find out, oh, I'm dying of kidney cancer. A major factor that limits our ability to contribute value is access to information. And he saw that when the internet came along, that changed things radically. It didn't make us doctors, but it gave us access to two things that had never been possible before. One was we could get our hands on information, and the other thing that in my case helped save my life was it gave us access to other people who are in the same boat, other patients who may have additional information. He coined this term, e-patients, engaged, empowered, equipped, enabled, and he spotted people across the top. He formed this club of people who are pioneers doing these things in the field. The man on the left, Gilles Friedman, lived in New York City, and he started the network of cancer patient communities that I eventually joined, called ACOR. Next to him is Alan and Cheryl Green, who formed the first physician website recognized by the AMA. The guy in the middle is my primary physician, Danny Sands. Well, to make a long story short, and the whole story is on my website, when I was diagnosed, this was my condition. I went in for a shoulder x-ray, and totally by coincidence, the doctor called the next day and said, your shoulder's going to be fine, but there's something in your lung. And what was in my lung was a tumor, we eventually figured out, of kidney cancer. And I, in fact, had one in the lung. And mind you, this is one of the mysteries of my story, is this is a generic diagram of kidney cancer from the website of the drug that I eventually got, and I have those tumors. All right, there was one in that shoulder, one in the left leg, which eventually broke. I fainted one morning and landed on it. There's one in the head there. Mine was in my skull. This shows one in the brain. And because I'm an overachiever, I had these additional ones, including, if you look at the head again, just before my treatment started, I had one growing out of my tongue. I had a kidney cancer tumor growing inside my mouth. Tumors only grow in muscle tissue in the most aggressive cases. My median survival was 24 weeks from diagnosis. And this will focus all your attention. I pictured, what's my mother's face going to look like when she buries me? That's a hard thing to think about. Even harder was sitting down with my daughter, who had just gotten out of college, saying, this doesn't look good. Here's what we're going to do. Well, I got to work. Some people I know just say, please, I'm scared to death, take care of me. That's fine. But when somebody wants to be involved, can't we find a way to say, yes, okay, here's a way you can pick up a shovel and help? My doctor recommended a patient community formed by that guy I showed you a couple of slides back. Now consider this. This is an online patient community run only by patients, no physicians involved except ones who are sick themselves. And within the first 2 hours of this, Seattle's a great place for this. Lots of social media has been going on for a long time. Within the first 2 hours of me posting a message introducing myself, look what they told me. Welcome. First of all, they said, this is the club nobody wants to belong to, but welcome. It's true. You know, it's funny. You go to any website, in academic journals, anything, and look up kidney cancer, and you will find all kinds of information about the nature of the disease and treatment options and clinical trials and everything. You will never find a direct answer to the question everybody has in their mind. How likely is it that I'm dying? All right? There is a difference between what patients want to know and what physicians are trained to study. They're not wrong, it's just we want to know about other things. Well, from the patient community, I heard this is an uncommon disease. Get to a hospital, it does a lot of cases. That's useful information, and it's not in any journal articles. By the way, their answer on the dying question was just profound. They said, if you don't want to die of kidney cancer, your goal is to live long enough to die of something else first. Well, you know, when you think there's no out, that's amazingly, I know a guy who was diagnosed the same month I was. He made the game out of it, live long enough for another treatment to come along. And it's a way out, right? And he just announced on Facebook last week that he's now clear of tumors after going through 5 different treatments in 8 years. They said, there's no cure, but this stuff, high-dose interleukin, sometimes works. It usually doesn't, but when it does, about half the time it's complete and permanent. Here I am, voila. My treatment, I was diagnosed in January, my kidney came out in March. My treatment started in April and ended in July. I haven't had a drop of anything since then. Now consider, I agree. Some people think that patient empowerment is anti-doctor. Nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, there are some pissed off, unhappy patients, generally ones who've been told to shut up and stay in their place. There are significant parallels between this movement and other social movements. Women's rights, race relations, where people spoke up for themselves. Sometimes they were welcomed and sometimes they were told to stay in their place, like, get back where you belong. Well, I'm here to say this is a good thing. Don't let them give you anything else first, the patients told me, because our experience is that reduces the chances that interleukin will work. And by the way, here are 4 doctors in your area who do it, and one of them was at my hospital. In my case, I was being steered toward that doctor, but I didn't know about it at the time. Consider this. Long story short, 50 weeks later, there's one of the tumors I had in my lung. I had 5 metastases in both lungs. They didn't even have to cut me open except to remove the kidney. This drug just kills the tumors without opening you up when it works. They don't know why, but it's, when you have no other choice. So And I got to walk my daughter down the aisle in 2009, which was pretty amazing, and now I have a granddaughter. Last year, the British Medical Journal, one of the top journals in the world, by the way, I didn't say it at the beginning, one of my maxims is patient is not a third-person word. The first medical meeting I went to, I spoke at outside Boston. I was invited up on stage, and I said, I want to propose that we change how we use our language here, because everyone's talking about patients as if it's the people out on Memorial Drive in Cambridge driving past. I'm here to tell you this is coming to your breakfast table. And it does. It changes your life if you've been through this. Well, last year, the British Medical Journal invited me to write an essay, which they put in print, not even online, about how the e-patient community helped save my life. Here's what they were talking about, okay? I found out that the side effects of interleukin sometimes kill people. The patient said, that's why you got to go to a specialist hospital. I said, okay, game on, where's my training program? I went to the National Cancer Institute, I went to the National Institutes of Health, I went to the Kidney Cancer Association, no information. I turned to my patient community, and I got 16 first-hand stories from people who'd been through it. And when every side effect hit me, I mean, at one point, my blood pressure dropped to 50/30 because I got capillary leak syndrome. The walls of my capillaries opened up, the fluid went out of my veins, my legs blew up like water balloons, they discontinued the treatment. With every side effect that I got, I had some idea what was going on, and today, my oncologist agreed to be quoted in the British Medical Journal. You were really sick. I don't know if you could have tolerated enough medicine if you hadn't been so involved. Now notice, I ended this essay by saying what I learned from the patients did not replace or contradict what the doctors know. It added to it additional value that you can bring by scouring the earth. You know, doctors have 11,000 condition codes that they're responsible for. All right? My kidney cancer community has one disease where they go deep and wide. They know researchers who are working on things that are years from ever being published. Well, so here's a question. I'm an MIT graduate. I understand the scientific method. How can it be that the most useful information can possibly come from outside of traditional channels? Tom Ferguson, the founder of this movement, at his death was working on a manifesto funded by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and it was published by his colleagues after his death. It's a free download. That's the cover of it. It's on the epatients.net website. He interviewed Dr. Donald Lindbergh, the director of the National Library of Medicine, who said, you know, when I was in medical school, I was told that a good doctor would go home and read 2 articles every night to keep up on things. He said if I did that today, after 1 year, I'd be 400 years behind. Do the math. There are 800, at that time, this was 10 years ago, there were 800 articles published every day. So if you read 2 of them, you fall behind by 400 to 1. We recalculated this in our society last year, the Society for Participatory Medicine. There are 2,200 papers published per day now. There is no way that any physician can possibly keep up on everything. The most difficult audience I ever spoke to was in Jerusalem 3 years ago. A meeting of the Israel Internet Society. My best friend was an Israeli physicist. He taught me a lot about the culture of Israeli intellectuals. To listen to Israeli doctors and lawyers debating the ethics of using the internet when it's not tightly controlled all day, and then who was the last thing between them and dinner? Me, the specimen, right? And I said, I know it feels like the world is ending, but it's not. It's changing. It is no insult to a clinician if a less trained person has seen something that you haven't. All right? But there's still no substitute for the trained mind to put it in context. So we're starting to see in the disruption, the coming to pieces of medicine, right? We can be information hounds and scouts who find things out that help our physicians if they welcome us. Then there's the lag time. Ferguson called it the lethal lag time, 2 to 5 years between the time a researcher finishes a study and the time it gets through the publication process. If you find out that your mother has 9 months to live, This will drive you to the internet because it is not your physician's fault that the information hasn't gotten to his or her inbox yet. All right? And I know people who have extended their lives or family members by being a good partner like this. And then finally, well, so here we understand now what's happening. This is a nice generic network diagram. Information is like a nutrient in the body, and these dotted lines are like capillaries. This is the micro mechanism by which we can move information around and bring it to the point where it's needed. So this is starting to become scientifically understood. Then finally, death by Googling. People say, stay off the internet, you'll kill yourself. Well, there was a doctor in Germany 10 years ago, he's in Toronto now, who studied and he found 0 deaths. For those of you who speak German, that's null. All right? And now he found people who'd done stupid things. They had found people who'd hurt themselves, but not a single person who had died from bad advice they got on the internet. You compare that with various reports of the rate of errors in hospitals, and Ferguson said something brilliant. It may be more dangerous not to educate yourself, right? And find out, how are things supposed to go? Laura was telling me about the wrong medication being delivered in the middle of the night and so on. Dennis Quaid's twins, a few years ago, almost died because of a 1,000-fold overdose of a blood thinner. And as in every other industry where quality improvement is instituted, it turns out it's not useful to blame the nurse or the individual worker in an unreliable system. When they did root cause analysis, they found that the vast majority of what happens in hospitals is not in reliable systems. You can study the field of high reliability organizing, HRO, for that. It turns out that the 2 bottles, the right one and the wrong one, looked almost identical, especially in a dimly lit room, and they were in the same column of the medication rack. That has been fixed, okay? Arguably, it's more dangerous not to Google your condition, and he said these conclusions are no more anti-doctor than Copernicus was anti-astronomer, right? Well, it's true, and this is a diagram that I've got a separate talk about this diagram. This is my colleague, I have a colleague in Holland, the town of Nijmegen, the site of the movie and the book, A Bridge Too Far, on the German border. They have a really interesting innovation center going on there, and they point out, this is a short version of this, in the old days, see the dotted line there is like the membrane between well-trained doctors at the top and know-nothing consumers at the bottom, all right? And in the old days, all knowledge resided in the institution. Now we have something that they call Health 2.0, where we bring things to the table sometimes, useful information. And the world that we're moving to, they predicted 4 years ago, is Health 3.0 and beyond, where we are all, doctors and patients alike, swimming in a common pond of information, right? I assert that patients and doctors who recognize this new world will have better access to useful information than people who think it's still the old way. It's not just patients, doctors rather, on the left, it's patients also, because if you go in assuming, of course, they know everything, then why should I even bother to get involved? You know, there's just a chance that things will go better if you're activated. Well, and now we understand, after years of using this diagram, the mechanism is that the patient, us, we have access to this network of information. That's how we can bring something useful. And in fact, the world that we're moving to now is where we are actually a network of networks. In every other industry, we know this, we welcome it, we work on it. In medicine, we're inclined not to. That's why I'm here to recruit you. Liquidity is another thing. I said I'm an IT geek. If you know about information liquidity, you'll love this. If you don't, here's your tutorial. All right, here's how things move around. A train of coal on tracks is not liquid. All right, moving it takes effort. It's slow and predictable. You know what's going to happen when, and arrivals that are unexplained are suspicious. How did that thing get here? Wait a minute, what's with that? Liquid is like a stream of snowmelt running through a forest. It's frictionless. In fact, controlling the flow takes effort. Have you ever tried to stop a viral attack on your company in social media? Oh, controlling the flow can be quite a problem. It's fast and unpredictable. and the tracks, so to speak, are everywhere. Well, this is what is reality now. We can see the parallel. This is how medical information moves around. Well, and in fact, now, the thing I want you to be aware of, this data quality issue, the Wall Street Journal on June 10th published this, saying that several big-name hospital systems now are asking patients to look at their own charts and find mistakes. They found that 80% of our medication lists in their computers have mistakes in them. They don't have the ability to go back and fix them. I'm saying to you, like the Capital One commercials, do you know what's in your wallet, medically speaking? Well, consider, they don't have, when phone bills and credit card statements were first computerized, it wasn't rare to find the wrong stuff in your envelope when the bill arrived, but they got that sorted out now. And it doesn't happen so much. Well, that's not happening in medicine. In my case, the thing that made me famous, I wrote this blog post about discovering that my medical record contained, my insurance billing history contained all kinds of mistakes, things that I'd never had. Said I had an aneurysm, so that's in my insurance history. I never did. There are technical reasons for that. When my mother, simple mistake here, okay? When my mother was discharged to rehab after a hip replacement 3 years ago, they didn't have electronic records transfer, so they had to print everything out and type it back in. You know what we learned in typesetting about typing piles of data? Oy, typos, right? Well, her hyperthyroid came across as hypothyroid, and this is not just a patient rights issue, patient safety issue. No clinician can possibly do their best job if they're given wrong facts about a patient. Fortunately, and here's a patient and family engagement, okay? There's a dynamic that I call the alpha daughter in a family. Commonly happens, it's like my two sisters who step in and say, all right, I'm in charge, what's going on? And they said to the rehab place, can we check the chart? And happily, the rehab place said, sure. They found the mistake before any harm was done. Go thou and do likewise. All right? Look at these people. And by the way, any doctor or hospital who pushes back and says, we don't want you looking at the record, run from them. Run from them because they don't understand how risky the system is that they're working in. And you don't want somebody like that with authority to give your family member the wrong information. The Institute of Medicine itself says e-patients are an important part of tomorrow's healthcare. This is a big report they published in 2012. They say a learning healthcare system has to be anchored on patient needs and perspectives, promotes the inclusion. So this is it. The top of academic medicine now says this is how we got to be doing medicine. If your hospital isn't familiar with it, be an advocate. Well, I'm going to skip ahead. Let me see. The British Medical Journal, by the way, earlier this year announced that they themselves now have a patient advisory panel advising them on articles. They're going to have, patients are going to be reviewing articles submitted about their diseases, which is astounding, not just other doctors, but patients saying, well, what about this problem, right? And plus, now when an author uploads an article, the form they fill out, they have to explain how they involve patients in defining the research question. Whoa, talk about an earthquake, right? So the future is here, as William Gibson said. It's just not evenly distributed yet. You know? But when you speak this way, as a family member, just know that you are not alone. This movement is a cultural revolution, and you know it's a revolution when the artists and musicians show up. I'm not kidding. I've been around long enough. Well, there's this woman, Regina Holiday, whose husband died of my disease also. Poor woman in Washington, D.C. She couldn't do anything, but she started painting people's medical stories on their coats. It's become the walking gallery of healthcare. There are over 300 of these things. Keith Boone is a guy I know who works for GE in health IT. If you saw this guy riding his motorcycle down the highway, you'd say, yeah, he works in health IT, right? He's got one of those jackets, and he wrote an e-patient rap for me on his blog, and when I did my TED Talk in Holland, they made me stick the rap in, I want to be an e-patient just like Dave. Give me my damn data because it's my life to save. That's... It's, and my man Ross Martin, who works for Deloitte, did a 4-minute music video. I one for the doctor, a 2 for the nurse. He's saying they're trying to treat me so to make me feel worse. Give me my damn data. Boom, boom. Well, all right, I'm going to skip ahead here. I just want you to know this is brand new. This is the baby boomers moving up through the age pipeline, okay? And the total number of 85-plus people is in the Jim McCurdy. Welcome all of us. We're coming your way. All right? Today there are about 1 million people in the U.S. 85 years and older, and by the time I'm 100 years old, there will be 17 million. The system will be crushed unless we know how to help participate in our care. So the details of this will be on my website, but I am asking you, I know there's a bunch of people in here who know how to define a goal, define a project, define a hill that we want to take, gather some people and deliver something, because at the Society for Participatory Medicine right now, we have a bunch of visionaries and we have very few competent middle managers. So I am here to recruit you. Thank you very much. Let patients help.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.